guys, when they make these pills, fentanyl is a powder and it'll clump together. So you might, have whatever you're mixing in a bathtub or a blender or whatever. It depends on how large this person's operation is. It'll clump together. So in one side of the mixture, all the fentanyl may have clumped over there. They call it the chocolate chip cookie effect. So just like if you make a batch of cookies, some cookies barely have any chocolate chips and other cookies might have most of the chocolate chips. And also within one pill, the fentanyl is not distributed evenly. So you might say, I'm going to split a pill with my friend. Well, one side, all the fentanyl might have clumped over there, so it is truly like Russian roulette. And, when we just really want the kids to have the full information, just to say, if you guys are struggling in any way, physical pain, emotional pain, mental issues that are troubling you, just go to the resources that are available. Go to your counselor, go to your coach, go to your parents. Don't think that these pills are what they're advertised as.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Henry's Uncle podcast. Today, I am speaking with Laura, a mother who lost her 17-year-old son, Zach, to a fentanyl poisoning in December 2020. Zach had no history of substance use and was a straight-A student, musician, and athlete. I urge you to take a listen as Laura talks about how easy it is for anyone, especially teenage kids, to get their hands on fake pills through various outlets, such as social media. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Henry's Uncle podcast. Today I'm really honored to be sitting down and talking with a mom, Laura, from California, I believe. I've seen her story in the news, traveling through social media and LinkedIn, and ask her to connect. And Laura, please go ahead and introduce yourself and why we're here today.
Thank you, Eric, for having me. I obviously wish it was under different circumstances, but I'm so appreciative to have the opportunity to talk with you and share my family's story. As you mentioned, my name is Laura. I reside just outside of Sacramento, California. And very tragically, on December 27th of last year, I lost my youngest child, my 17-year-old son, Zach, to fentanyl poisoning in a counterfeit pill. And this was not anything I'd ever heard of. We were taken completely off guard by this. And once we learned what was going on, what took his life, we just really, as a family, I have two older kids and Zach's dad, we all said, we want to be public about this. We want to share what we've learned to save other kids, from what happened to Zach. We can't warn our kids about dangers that we don't know are out there, and this was, like I say, something that just completely blindsided us. I can tell you a bit about Zach and why this came so out of the blue for us. So Zach, as I mentioned, was the youngest of our kids. Our older two, at the time Zach died, were 25 and 22, in college, doing great, never had any issues with substances, amongst any of our kids. Zach was just doing tremendous. He'd been a straight A student since elementary school, just beloved by everybody, just lit up a room. That's what we keep hearing from friends of his since we lost him, just saying what a compassionate guy he was and just always trying to bring out the best in his peers. He'd almost gotten a perfect score on the SATs. He was a star athlete on the track team and on his soccer team. He starred in the school musical. So he played Troy Bolton in the school's production of High School Musical. He had done that within the last few months of his life. So we just had no red flags that anything like this was coming because he was just doing so well. And the first thing that we noticed just was over the Christmas break last year, he seemed a little bit more tired, but he had, when we kind of asked him about it, this literally was within 2 days of losing him. He had a plausible explanation. I was up late, I was playing video games. We were still heavily locked down and at that time. And so a lot of the kids, because all of their all of their activities were so curtailed, a lot of his friends had gotten into playing Minecraft, on the computer and engaging with each other that way so they could be socially distanced and safe. And so it wasn't unusual for him to lose track of time and not crawl into bed till, 5 in the morning or something. So then the conversation was get to bed earlier. Let's get the computer off earlier. So we never could have imagined that what it turned out was actually he had tried what he thought was a Percocet pill and had gotten, drowsy from that. And we really didn't have any forewarning. Like I say, all the things that that parents learn to keep your kids, away from drugs and that type of thing. All of that was a part of our family. I mean, we were super engaged. Zach's dad coached the soccer team. I helped him rehearse for his auditions for the musical. I mean, we were at all of his events. He had a wonderful relationship with his siblings and his friends, a wonderful, very sweet girlfriend. They'd been together a year. Nobody saw any sign of that this could be his fate. And then with the lockdowns, everything was just so topsy-turvy in the world. So as we have, once we lost him, we started just putting all the kind of the pieces together. There were no drugs in his room. When the paramedics came, his dad found him on December 27th. He was already gone, though they tried to revive him and the first responders came and everything. They quickly, saw that it was too late. And so pronounced him, dead here at our home. And the first time I ever heard fentanyl, they ushered everybody out of the house, to do an investigation of any evidence they could find, why this vibrant, healthy 17-year-old young man, he would be dead at his desk. They ruled out any self-harm. There was no injury to his body. There were no drugs in his room. There was really no evidence. And they just said, we'll have to do an autopsy and a toxicology report, but we're going to speculate that fentanyl ended his life. And that was truly the first time had ever heard of this. And I'd certainly never heard of these counterfeit pills that are being mass produced and marketed to kids. And so we did get the confirmation of that. And then there was an arrest made. We were able to get Zach's phone unlocked. His girlfriend knew the code and got it unlocked. And there was very overwhelming, evidence for an arrest. Our local DA's office had asked us to not really share anything publicly until the toxicology and the, confirmed everything and an arrest had been made. And once all of that happened, like I say, the four of us just made a collective decision together that we were going to be very, very vocal about this, because as we talked with friends in our neighborhood and other parents, at Zach's school, everybody was as dumbfounded as we were. Like, what are you talking about? What is fentanyl? How are our kids getting their hands on it? What do you mean there's drug dealers on Snapchat and, all these other social media platforms? And so as you mentioned, you've seen some of the news reports, we've been able to get coverage of this story in our local NBC affiliate here in our area. And we've been on the nightly news interviewed by Kate Snow, just because drug landscape has completely changed. And, no longer is it the case that you will get red flags because, the normal trajectory was somebody might experiment, hopefully they'd move through that phase of life and put that behind them. But if not, some might become addicted, habitual users, or and become dependent. But you would be able to see that progression happen and hopefully intervene, get them help, access services, though that's a whole other topic of conversation because of the woefully lacking, services for people. But at least you would get those, red flags. Well, now with the proliferation of fentanyl and then the way it's being used so deceptively, you just may not get any red flags. And that's why we just want to make sure parents know the conversations that they need to be having with their kids. It's just too accessible.
So if I could back you up a little bit, first of all, I'm terribly sorry for your whole family. It's just a tragic loss all around, and it's very hard to find words to tell people of, just besides sorry, right? It's heartbreaking, and I we talked yesterday for a little bit before, and I know my brother died. It's almost 3 years. December 9th will be his third year, and And at the time, he was 1 month shy of his 35th, so he was 34, and it's this progression over those last 3 years where it's like, man, it's he was so young, things like, and you do hear people who are 25, 26, 27, dying, and it's like, I mean, it's all very tragic. And then all of a sudden, it seems like with the last year and a half, it's just like you start hearing kids who are 15, 16, 17, 18, and it's like now, like this progression of saying my brother was young, it's like it seems like he was so old now, with this fentanyl epidemic. And it's like, it just that breaks my heart, where I can't imagine as as a sibling, it's totally different compared to when a parent loses a child. I mean, I see that day and night, and I can't express how anybody feels. But I just wanted to back up when you said he was feeling tired. I mean, that's so hard as a teenager, because I remember those conversations, right? Like, they're growing and staying up late, video games, phones, blah blah blah, you name it. Like it's. And you mentioned he had a Percocet. Was the tiredness, did that come from the Percocet? Was it more than just one time where he was taking it, or was it just that one time, you believe, where he took it, felt drowsy, then ended up passing away?
So what we have been able to piece together through the investigation is that on Christmas Eve, he and a friend had tried a pill. Well, the other thing with these pills is that they are completely inconsistent. We can get into that later about how they produce these pills and why there's no consistent dosaging happening. So our belief is that that pill that he tried on Christmas Eve must have had a pretty light amount of fentanyl in it. And so on Christmas Day, he was just drowsy and probably kind of withdrawing a little bit.
When you describe like tiredness, was it, I mean, something, because it definitely, picked you up, picked you and your husband up of, was it extreme tiredness where he was just sleeping, for a ridiculous amount of time, or just?
No, it's
Okay.
just that he had slept in, and then, which was not atypical, teenagers sleep in. And he just seemed like not as perky as normal. Is nothing where I felt like, oh my gosh, we need to get to the ER. You seem so tired. It was more just like, like he wasn't fully like as perky as he would kind of normally be. And he's like, no, I'm just so tired. The guys and I, we just stayed up till, really late playing the video games. And then of course the conversation is like, we had Christmas today, we had a lot going on, let's get, school's going to start back up. You guys need to get back on track, because school's going to start back up, because they were finally going to start getting to go in person, after the break. So no, it wasn't anything, like I say, from my perspective, it's more just like, okay, we got to get back on a better sleeping routine because school's going to start back up kind of thing. It must have been a very kind of, like I say, light amount of the drug in that one. For some reason, he decided to try one more pill on the night of the 26th. So on the day of the 26th, I was working all day, but his dad said, he seemed fine all day, back to normal, like he'd gotten a good night's sleep, back to normal. For some reason, the night of the 26th, he decided to take, one last pill, and that was the last pill. And, you never know. Fentanyl is so powerful that, I know of other parents of younger, high school age people where, they did develop an addiction to the pills. They still thought it was a legitimate pill, but they had, a hard time getting away from it. And maybe a few months down the road, then they got one that was deadly. But that's the whole thing with it. It's Russian roulette with these pills. One pill might not have hardly any fentanyl in it, and another pill could have enough to kill 5 people. And you just don't know. And they're stamped and pressed to look exactly like legitimate medicines, so they look like Percocet and Xanax and Oxy and Adderall. And they're done on purpose. They're done on purpose that way to get these young users hooked. And they're not chemists when they put these pills together. They don't have strict controls and measuring. And with fentanyl, the difference between, as a fellow parent of mine puts it, the difference between high and die is micrograms.
Micrograms, yeah. No, it's insane because I remember, when I found my brother the evening of December 9th, it's a very interesting topic because his thing was oxy, and he had at that time, after the detective showed up and stuff and came down and talked to me, he said he had about 30 pills left in the box, and he talked about how much it was worth, street value, blah blah blah. But I knew he was taking pills beforehand because when I was frantically trying to search for his address, in shock, I had no idea what his address was at that time, and I saw rolled up post-it notes and things like that, so I know obviously he was taking pills beforehand. And so, like, there it was, like you just mentioned, it really is Russian roulette of, everything seems fine. He thought he was taking Oxy 5s or Oxy 30s. And, I 100% guarantee that I know he didn't know anything about fentanyl and pills. And
this is a phenomenon.
Yeah. And here it was, I called the coroner, 2 or 3 months after to talk to someone to, confirm it. I can't remember how long it was after his death, and they said, gosh, it was, and I was astonished by this because he did have Oxy and fentanyl in the system. The Oxy was relatively very low, but the fentanyl was, and I wish I remember the exact number. I had it in my head for so long, but it basically ended up as, in the blood levels, they were doing nanograms, and basically the amount of fentanyl in his system was anywhere between 40 to 400 times the therapeutic dose. And I asked the coroner to repeat that twice, because you're going, first of all, a therapeutic dose of fentanyl, I don't even know what that is. It must be so tiny. And then all of a sudden you're going anywhere between 40 to 400 times, and you're just like, what the, pardon my language, like, what the fuck? That's just...
Yeah, exactly. And so we have thrown ourselves into educating on this issue and connecting with other parents right pretty quickly after we went public and shared on social media, what had happened. We got connected to a family named Ed and Mary Ternan, and they had lost their son, Charlie, about 8 months before we lost Zach. He was a college senior. They had started a nonprofit organization in his name called Song for Charlie. I highly recommend people go there. It's songforcharlie.org. And
100% recommend it. It's a wonderful, tons of resources.
Very good resources. They put, all of their effort into warning the kids. There's great videos on there, 90 seconds aimed at kids. Go to that website, watch these 4 explainer videos with your kids, anywhere from really middle school and up. The content's appropriate. And they've put together, working with Beaverton, Oregon, a school district up there, crafted by teachers for teachers, lesson plans for middle school and high school on this new dynamic of these synthetic drugs. And so it's truly something that needs to be in the classroom. And that's what we're working toward, is getting this into the classroom, because it's completely different. These synthetic drugs, they're lab made. So you're not relying on plants or crops or seasons or irrigation or large, tracts of land for plants. It's all now going to these chemical-based, lab-produced synthetic drugs that are magnitudes, more deadly and addictive. And they're being marketed deceptively. So they're being inserted into heroin, into cocaine, into methamphetamine. And then what's really hurting the younger generation are these fake counterfeit pills, because the kids like Zach's age, he was 17. These kids have been raised where if something's wrong with you, there's a pill for that. There's a pill for that. You have ADHD, there's a pill for that. Anxiety. And so partying, using these pills recreationally has been around their whole life. And so someone, especially these middle school and high school kids, they don't realize, like they would never maybe go do cocaine or heroin or meth, but to get a little buzz from a pill, oh, my uncle did that growing up, or my big sibling did that, well, 18 months ago, or maybe, several years ago, they might have really gotten a Percocet or a real pharmaceutical pill, but because which is a good thing, they crack down so much on the pill mills and overprescribing. Well, what happens? The cartels come in to fill that void with these counterfeit pills, just filler material, fentanyl. And one of the questions we get all the time is, well, this doesn't make sense to me, because why would they make something that would kill their customers? That doesn't make sense to me. Well, some dead customers is the price of doing business. They are making money hand over fist. They can press these pills for pennies, sell them to our kids from anywhere from $10 to $30, and it's pure profit. And if some of their customers die, they die, because right now there's minimal, if any, criminal justice ramifications for them.
There's not, and I know that it's up here. I know, I don't know if you were ever introduced to the Martinic family. I know Aaron has done some work for Song for Charlie as well. Yeah. And I know their parents, they lost their son. I want to say, was it 2017, 2016? He was 24 or 25 at the time, I believe. And he thought it was Xanax. It was a fentanyl pill. And they tried to introduce law, I don't know, spring of 2019 here in Oregon of, if you do deliberately sell pills that end up result in death, and then, they could go after you, right, if there's evidence. And it's not like, going after the low level dealers, et cetera. They want to go to the higher ups. And that was, shot down very quickly and didn't go anywhere. And, I know, I was pretty raw at that event, just a few months after my brother passed. And my thing is there's so much to it that, and we're talking, very quickly, there's a lot of complexities to it. But my thing is when there is a bad batch of lettuce or whatever it may be that has E. coli, the FDA will immediately do a recall. They will track it down to the source, put in implementation on how can we stop it and how can this be prevented in the future. It's
and if someone deliberately contaminated that lettuce, that'd be a whole other aspect to it as well.
Exactly. And there's nothing like that. And I think it's very frustrating because, again, it goes back to, the fighting between, I think, us on one side and then the public health. And that's one reason why I started this podcast, because I found that very interesting, that whole testimony on both sides. I really did, of, why we shouldn't go after people in terms of the whole criminal justice system and et cetera, so on. Right. And then our side of, parents and siblings, losing our loved ones to this fentanyl. And to me, I think the biggest frustration, the biggest frustration is you have China, who is deliberately creating these analogs, fentanyl analogs. And it's like, when President Trump put in I can't remember what it was, but, say, China can't export certain amount of, X amount of analogs out of China, but it doesn't matter because all you have to do is change one molecule, you have a new analog. And so they can bypass it so quickly. And then those analogs, which, by the way, the Chinese government gives VAT rebates to these pharmaceutical companies over there, get shipped down to the cartels. The cartel takes them, makes fentanyl, and then ships them right up here. And it is so maddening because you just look at it as it's basically, to me, and it's a war going on that is killing hundreds of thousands of people a year. And no one, exactly. It's just silent. It's just silent.
And the thing that maddens me, because I'm in California and also very much on the, decriminalization push and all of that. And it's like, okay, but what you have to understand is it is altogether different in this proliferation of synthetic drugs and the way they're being used deceptively, and okay, if you want to say we don't want to go the criminal route, well, then get this education in the schools tomorrow, because it's not fair. It's like these poor young people are lambs to the slaughter. They're growing up in a world that they didn't create. They didn't create this pill popping culture. They didn't create these synthetic, drugs. They're not doing anything different than what generations, before them have done. Maybe that's the age, experimentation, but it used to be, you might, sneak some beers, get a hangover and learn your lesson. with the way the world is right now, you don't get a chance to learn a lesson or a second chance. And so that's why, we go in front of high school kids. That we haven't gone into a middle school at this point yet, but we're at high schools. We're talking to the kids. We're sharing Zach's story because, like I mentioned before, it's not. I think there's a lot of parents, and I would have included myself in this as well before we lost Zach, that thinks that feels this sense of security that, oh, well, my kid would never die from a drug because he doesn't use drugs. And if he ever started using drugs, I'd see that progression occur. Well, I can't tell you how many of my fellow grieving moms I've talked to exactly like me. We were doing all the right things. We were completely engaged with our child, or we knew they were having anxiety and we were at the doctor and we were doing all of the right things. I didn't know that they could go to Snapchat and get what they thought was a Xanax and it was actually a death pill. Every household needs to know this changing, how everything has changed.
So could you, I want you to harp on this definitely more, because I think this is an area that Song for Charlie really hits on very well, is, just like the Ternan son, from what I can remember from their story, was their son also went to social media to buy a pill as well. So, could you explain more? Because I think a lot of, these parents who have kids, around 10, 11, 12, and this is a very dangerous part of social media. And it seems like this stuff could be cracked down very easily with the amount of technology they have, but it seems like it's just moving at a snail's pace.
Yeah, I get frustrated that it's not, moving more quickly. I know that, they've come out with statements, all the social media companies have, that they're working on this. Obviously, these criminal elements, they're savvy. They can work around things, pretty quickly. I don't have all the answers to how to get that all cleaned up and regulated. There are parents pushing for, liability, that maybe if these social media companies are held liable, they'd be more incentivized. I'm not as much in that sphere of the effort. I'm more on the sphere, with Song for Charlie, getting the education out there, getting it to the kids, through posts on social media, through the schools, to parents, to kids, to families, and doing town hall meetings and things like that to really, because that, for me right now, I feel like that's where I can see the most immediate result. Everything else is important. Everything else needs to be worked on, legislative, cracking down on the supply chains, getting these dealers off social media. Those are all incredibly important. I feel like my skill set is best used getting in front of the kids. I feel like afterwards, we get so many kids that'll come up to us and just say, thank you so much. Some kids, because we've stayed mostly in our local area, will be like, I knew Zach. I never would have thought this could have happened to Zach, but all of this needs to happen. It really needs to happen at a national level. I mean, we're seeing more of it, with the DEA, head of the DEA, Ann Milgram, has been, more in the news talking about what this issue is. And I'm very grateful to see that. But there's still a lot of, misinformation out there. People are still at local media and national media, reporting things as overdose. The language really needs to be updated to poisoning, especially when you're talking about fentanyl, because so many people that are dying from fentanyl had no intention of ingesting fentanyl. And that's where I think when you really get a chance to talk to people, that's where the light bulb goes off for them is, when you talk about the different aspects of this issue, people will say demand reduction, well, let's work on demand reduction. Okay. Most people aren't demanding fentanyl. Who's demanding fentanyl? The suppliers, the dealers, because it's cheap, it's plentiful. They're the ones demanding fentanyl. So if we want to talk about demand reduction, then we need to go after the people that are dealing this stuff to de-incentivize them using it deceptively and killing people. Because people like my son and like a friend of mine, her son was only 13. And someone he was connected to on Snapchat offered him a pill that killed him. He was only 13 years old.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
People need to understand it truly can happen in any family. Another recommendation I'd like to share with your listeners is Sam Quinones has a new book. He wrote Dreamland, the bestseller, and his newest book, The Least of Us, really does a great job explaining why these synthetics have risen up so much and why they've proliferated so widely and why this is the deadliest drug landscape we've ever seen. And that's not hyperbolic. I mean, that's honest.
No, it's true. And I just want to, some people, and when we talk about fentanyl and the fentanyl, this whole epidemic, I don't want to take away from what is still going on, and it has occurred in the past from the likes of Sacklers, Purdue Pharma and Johnson & Johnson and everyone who basically have driven this epidemic to where it is now. And I don't want to, gloss over that whatsoever. I know because we're talking about a very specific thing right now that has affected us both. And yeah, so I just want to make that statement as well, because again, this is, the amount of greed, the Purdue Pharma was essentially a cartel operating here in America. And my God, I wish every single one of them family members would be in jail for the rest of their fucking life.
Yeah, without that, they laid the groundwork for, what's happening now. No, they have so much culpability in this whole culture of, and what's been going on and why now there's this, market for these counterfeit pills.
And so, explain to us, if I was a teenager, college student, young adult, like your son and, other people as well. So it's, I don't use Snapchat, TikTok, et cetera. So essentially I can just go online and just buy a pill through social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You could go and search, for Oxy or Xanax or Percocet, and people will hit you up, and they, they'll have menus of it and the price, and they'll deliver it to your house. I have several friends who lost their kids. Their child said, "I'm going to go check the mail," or something. Plausible reason to leave the house, and met a drug dealer around the corner with this pill. It's just that easy, and these kids, think they're getting a Xanax or a Percocet or an Oxy or something. And I'm not condoning that. I'm not condoning that is, that they're looking to use, a pharmaceutical, what they think is a pharmaceutical pill without a prescription. I'm not condoning that at all, but it should not kill them.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I mean, that's just insanity. And, when you mentioned, and you talked about this earlier as well, and it touched on this, and I can't remember what book it was from, if it was from Dreamland or Dope Sick or some other books. It touched on me when you said, our, kids, our generation, I'm 35. And so I was part of that where, all the ADHD medication started coming out in high school and all that, it's like, oh, if you're hyper, it's like, oh, you must take Adderall or, whatever it may be, when really it's just like, I don't think some human beings are meant to be sat down for 8 hours a day in a desk, right? That's just not how humans operate. But all of a sudden it's like, you must take this pill, you have to take this pill, et cetera, to fix what we think is wrong. And there was a part in this one book, and I found it, just a very amazing thought was, they were interviewing a camp counselor who has been in the same camp since like the 70s. And he goes, in the 70s, when kids came, there was no parent brought a prescription drug to our front office saying this kid must take the, X prescription one. And it was in the 80s, there was a couple kids, 90s, you started seeing it. And then he goes by the 2000s, it was every single kid who came to camp had a prescription. And I think that is such, something that is not talked about enough, where there's many things that's probably not wrong with, children or young adults, of being too hyper or whatever it may be. It could just be, they need to go counseling, or they need to have additional just outside time just to burn some energy off. And it's like everything now is you must have a pill to get it fixed. What's quote unquote wrong with you? And so
exactly. And it's, and I'm not suggesting that there aren't situations where
100%,
that it's very helpful for someone, but, I think it is being, overused. And I think kids, it's just made it so normalized, for, kids like my kids' age. And so they think of this, using it, you like trying to experiment with one Percocet, they think of that as the safe way, to maybe try a buzz, or if they truly are in pain, if they truly are like, gosh, I twisted my ankle and I can't get to the doctor because they're not doing appointments because we've been locked down or whatever. Someone told me a Percocet's good for that. I can get one from Snapchat, and they are trusting. They're so trusting because it's name brands, to them. And they haven't been warned. And like when we go into the schools and talk, it's like, guys, we just want you to be armed with information. And if you truly have pain, or you're truly, going through something and you need mental health help, absolutely do that. See your doctor, see a mental health care professional. The thing you have to completely take off, anything that you would do, is going to social media and believing any of these people when they say they have a Xanax for you. It won't be. In our area in Sacramento County, the DA just came out with information that in all of their seizures of pills that look, to you and I, exactly like pharmaceutical pills, 97% of them are counterfeits in Sacramento County. And the DEA estimates that of the counterfeit pills that they have seized at the national level, that 4 out of 10 of those contain a lethal amount of fentanyl.
Yeah. And when I saw that, I looked at that and I go, I bet that number is probably higher than what they're reporting. I mean, because just the amount of millions and millions of pills they get every single year.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's insane.
Like when I talk to the kids, the main things, I try to impress upon them is, guys, when they make these pills, fentanyl is a powder and it'll clump together. So you might, have whatever you're mixing in, a bathtub or a blender or whatever. It depends on how large this person's operation is. It'll clump together. So in one side of the mixture, all the fentanyl may have clumped over there. They call it the chocolate chip cookie effect. So just like if you make a batch of cookies, some cookies barely have any chocolate chips and other cookies might have most of the chocolate chips. And also within one pill, the fentanyl is not distributed evenly. So you might say, I'm going to split a pill with my friend. Well, one side, all the fentanyl might have clumped over there, so it is truly like Russian roulette. And, when we just really want the kids to have the full information, just to say, if you guys are struggling in any way, physical pain, emotional pain, mental issues that are troubling you, just go to the resources that are available. Go to your counselor, go to your coach, go to your parent. Don't think that these pills are what they're advertised as. I wish I'd known to have these conversations with Zach. I had no idea. In our area, these pills are newer to our area. So in 2019, there were only 4 confirmed deaths from fentanyl in our county. In 2020, it was up to, I believe, 26 or 27. And Zach was the last death in our county in 2020 from fentanyl. So our county was still just really coming to understand that these pills were here in a big way. We're getting more awareness now. Sacramento County DA has an awareness campaign. Placer County, our county is trying to do more around that as well. But it's hard because some of the places, that running ads on like the radio or billboards or things could get to the parents, but we really need to get this like directly in front of the kids at the school and things like that.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned. I remember before my brother passed. You're watching the nightly news or whatever, and you hear about the opioid epidemic, and you'll listen to the numbers, and it's like you kind of go, God, that is just it's ridiculous, but it doesn't hit because just like many of these things, it doesn't hit you until it happens to you, and like you mentioned. We can run as many ads as possible, which are always good, because one eyeball could save a life, right? And but like you said, like it's just getting to the kids, getting in front of their face, and hopefully they are listening, digesting it and understand how serious it is.
Yeah, and it's tough because they're at that age, they're decision making is not fully formed yet. So, they are at that age where they have more of kind of a risk taking tendency, that tendency of I'm invincible, so we really also try to tell the kids like, hey, you guys, we're not exaggerating this. Like, we're not here to just do like scare tactics or that kind of thing. But like, you really need to understand the reality of this, the severity of this, because I don't want it to be, every kid is going to have buried a friend. But if we don't get a handle on this, that's what it's going to be, and I don't want that to be what has to happen before people really take this seriously. But the numbers, it was up 30%, nationally in 2020. If we go up 30% every year, I mean, that's horrific, and it's preventable. I really feel that it can be, in terms of having massive public awareness campaigns around this, trying to get a handle on the supply chain. But again, that's not really an avenue I've jumped in. That's not my skill set. And I have no other parents that are really working hard on that lane. But that's really tough, because these chemicals, they're getting shipped in the mail into the pills are being pressed in our country as well, not just south of the border. There's bad actors in the United States that can order these chemicals. We're not screening our mail, the US mail is not being screened carefully enough.
Yeah.
And
it's I was at a conference a few years ago in 2019, and they had different classes, breakout sessions and whatnot, and DEA, and there was a few of the postal service workers there who were higher up, and like you just talk about it, and it's like the millions of packages coming through different facilities, right? And I mean, you can have dogs, you can have screening machines, everything, but my God, you're not going to be able to do that.
Odorless. So it's not, I don't know what kind of technology they need to develop to find these things. And, we've been part of Zoom sessions with people that, work high up in the Border Patrol. And they're like, I hate to tell you this, guys, but a lot of it gets through legal ports of entry, because they're so savvy about how to hide these, the powders and the pills and things in cars and trucks. And it's impossible to prevent it all from coming in. So that's why the education and the public awareness campaigns are so important. Treating these, when they come upon a scene of someone that has died, treating it like a crime scene. So you're gathering evidence to try to find where these dealers are operating out of, where the supply chain is. We just really need to take it seriously, because there are so many people, it's kids like, my son and my good friend's 13-year-old and my other friend's 14-year-old, who were just barely dipping their toes in the waters of like experimenting or, blowing off steam or self-medicating, and they're gone right away. And then there's, people, like your brother, who have maybe struggled a bit, gotten, back on track, done better. And then if you relapse in a fentanyl world, it's totally different than relapsing 5 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it is. It's very true. Thing you can really say, it is Russian roulette. I mean, it's very scary. It's insanely scary. And like you said, the supply chain. I mean, I don't, you have people crossing the border legally who, strapping it to their bodies, and like someone down in San Diego I was talking to, who I think was in the FBI, and she said this lady, getting paid, she crossed over with 100,000 pills over a course of 2 months. I was talking to a police officer out here, and he showed me a picture of a bust just south of Portland, 60,000 pills. And you just look at it and you go, how small they are, when they wrap it up and stuff, and you go, and that's just a drop in the bucket. And that's 60,000 pills. I mean, because for me, and I'm sure many other people just like yourself, you look at a pill and you think that's one death. I mean, that's one fatality now. And so you look at that as 60,000, and it's just, oh my God.
I know. And some of these kids, die from they took half the pill, or they shared it with a friend, and one of the friends died and one didn't. And then the other thing that we don't talk enough about in this conversation is death is not the only thing that can happen here. There are, young people that might get revived with Narcan, but they've still been deprived of oxygen long enough that they have lasting brain trauma. So maybe they didn't perish, but they're not the same. Their brain is not the same. They've been deprived of oxygen long enough before they were revived that they're left with permanent brain damage, and that's horrific as well for them, and certainly not something that we talk about enough. And then also the ripple effects from one death. I mean, Zach was so beloved and so well known and loved, and had such a great circle of friends, and it's the trauma to his friend group and to to us, see, how there's nothing. It's so incredibly traumatic to see your child deceased, to see coroners standing over them, to see them zipped into a body bag, to see, to know they're going through an autopsy, to bury them, and to have been completely blindsided, to be doing everything that you believe is the best, that you can do as a parent, you feel. And, kids have to have some kind of freedom, especially if they're, good kids. Any freedom Zach had, he really had earned. He'd always been a really good kid, but I had no idea that there were drug dealers on his phone, that he could, they reach out to these kids, or, and market things deceptively. And it's
the worst feeling in the world. There's nothing that, you can describe it. It's, it was December 9th, I found my brother, and little did I know he was sitting, he was in a morgue up until December 30th or December 31st when, he was cremated. And I'm just sitting there going, and again, you're in shock. I mean, you're just trying to, piece things together. You're going, like for my dad and I, we were trying to get, we downloaded our, AT&T cell phone records and highlighted every single number, put in a spreadsheet, who was the odd liar, outlier. And one thing I would say is, as a family, it doesn't matter how old, your kids get or whatever it may be, but if a family is trusting all that kind of stuff, do share your passwords, because the one thing I was able to access my brother's, a lot of his accounts, because his passwords were what I assumed, and so I was lucky to kind of piece things together that way. But there was the Snapchat I wasn't able to get into. I couldn't access Apple. Didn't want to help out, and I think that's an absolute disgrace. That really pissed me off. And I've seen other stories where parents, child might commit suicide or commit suicide, and the parents are just trying to open up their phone to get photos, and they can't. So, do share your passwords, have a backup plan, just in case. I have his phone on my desk here, and it's like, I have one more chance of his password before it completely shuts down. And it's like, I'll never try it because, there's no point.
Well, I just saw posted, I'll look for it and email it to you. I'm involved in a lot of different fentanyl awareness groups on Facebook. And I'm pretty sure on one of them, I'll do a little investigating. And if I find it, I'll send it to you, where there was a company advertising on there about their services to get into phones, for these kinds of circumstances and things.
Okay. Cause so from what I understood, and that would be great, cause I'm going back 2 years now, it was that big case in California where someone opened fire at San Bernardino or something like that in a mall. And it became this whole privacy issue of the FBI was able to unlock their phone with a device. And that company gained a lot of notoriety. They were like $30,000 machines. And then that fall of 18, Apple's update blocked that device. And so when my brother died, I remember even the police said, we're not sure because of this new update how much information I think they pulled like 25% of the information off the phone. And it's so maddening because we're just trying to get answers. That's it. And there's got to be a way. But yes, please, I would, if there's a company out there that.
I think I did just see that recently posted.
Okay.
But no, we were so fortunate that Zach's girlfriend knew his code. Because when we the first people on the scene was our local police, and they didn't even take his phone because they said, if it's locked, there's nothing we can do. Know his code. Like I say, he was a very trustworthy kid. So we gave, any privacy he had, we felt he really had earned, and so we were very grateful, that his girlfriend, that's the kind of relationship they had. They had so much trust and they had such a great friend. They had the same passcode, on each of their phones, just because, they just trusted each other so much. And they were such great best friends. So she was able to get, the code to us and get it unlocked. And then we were able to get it into the hands of the detectives in the sheriff's department because they handled narcotic, cases and things. And that's where all the evidence really came from, was from his phone. But there's so many families who don't get any answers.
Yeah. It's frustrating, and I think about it a lot is what would I do? It's, and again, this is all very personal. And it's like, for me, all I've ever wanted to do is I wanted to know who sold him those pills so I can just go tell him. That's it. For me, I don't know what jail would do to the person. I just want him to know that what he delivered to my brother killed him at the age of 34 for no reason whatsoever.
I know, and that's the thing. I think that when we, as bereaved families, go to legislators, go, to these committee hearings, and because there was some legislation that didn't go anywhere in California. A grieving father who had lost his daughter a year before we lost Zach, and it was a counterfeit pill and all of that. So he spearheaded some legislation through his local Senator Melendez. And she put this, legislation to the Public Safety Committee, it's Senate Public Safety Committee, it's SB 350, and it never made it out of committee. And all that the bill said was if someone is convicted or does a plea deal that they've, been selling drugs, they're given an admonishment that says dealing drugs is potentially harmful to human life. And if you resume this activity and you provide a drug to someone that kills them, then we can charge you with murder or manslaughter or, homicide. And it was a warning. That's all. We do this for drunk drivers. I've been in court now multiple times on my son's case. I've heard the admonishment given to people that are convicted of a DUI. And that says, if you resume this activity, if you continue to go behind the wheel drunk and you kill someone in the process, we can charge you with murder. This is happening.
That admonishment did not go through.
It did not get out of this public safety committee. It hasn't even gotten out of the committee to go to the floor.
That's ridiculous. I mean, I'm thinking for a drunk driver, even the bartender who was serving them drinks could be held liable.
Yeah.
So it goes, as I know, there's always that fight between, the parent family side versus the public health official side, but sorry.
The hope is to dissuade people from resuming.
Yes. Yeah.
Nothing can bring my child back. Nothing can back. I don't have vengeance in my heart. None of anything that I'm doing is motivated by vengeance. It's all motivated to save other families from this. Because to me, it's like either you might have someone that is selling and really, maybe is young, maybe doesn't really understand the consequences, maybe got caught up in something, hopefully can make a better choice and get out of that. But if there are people that have no conscience, that have no problem selling and killing,
multiple times,
I see no reason that they should just be out on the street, continuing this activity. And it's just, it's very, very frustrating because I think that the people that would, criticize us parents are like, oh, well, you just want vengeance and this. No, we know the pain of bearing a child. We know how horrific this is. And we don't want other families going through it. We want whatever will work to dissuade people from selling, to educate kids and people about what this new deadly drug landscape is all about, to lobby for better services for people who are in active addiction or in recovery, or to destigmatize. I'm so tired of people blaming families or blaming the deceased. I'm so tired of it. It's like, can't we all care about each other? Can't we all try to work together to really look at, doctors are telling us that treat addiction, and what these people that are confiscating these drugs are telling us about how deadly they are, and just get this information out there. And when we first went public, I made the mistake of looking at some comments, under one of the
Oh
news
yeah,
reports.
sure.
And there were
Nasty.
so many nasty comments about my son, about me. And I sobbed and I was just like, am I doing the right thing? I want Zach to be remembered for how he lived. But then I just thought, Zach would want us to warn other people. He just would. He loved people. He loved helping people. And I just thought there's no way I can now know all of this information and not try to warn other families.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't understand people who have time to read an article and then post on it, especially negative stuff towards a family who just lost someone. It doesn't make sense. It's not even worth your time or anybody's time. And what you're doing is saving tons of lives.
And I have to just focus on that because I get far more people reaching out to me saying, thank you so much. I sat down with my kids and had this conversation, and I hold on to that. And then at one point I finally just said, you know what? I've been through the worst thing a person can go through, the absolute worst thing a person can go through, losing a child, losing them suddenly, losing them to a danger I didn't even know existed. There's nothing you can say to me, that I'm going to let hurt me because, it's not worth giving any space to that, but it takes time to get there. And I mean, that's what keeps some parents from talking and speaking out. And that's why I just wrap my arms around other parents who speak out on this, because I think the more of us that do, and the more of us that support each other, we can affect really positive change in destigmatizing these conversations. That's what has to happen. This issue, it's not a moral issue. Addiction is a medical issue. And we need to talk about what works to help people that are in active addiction. We need to talk about what will prevent kids from potentially, experimenting with drugs, especially in this deadly day and age, and have more resources for mental health care, better insurance coverage for treatment, and just better sense of community, with each other. And for me, because of my personal loss, for me, it's also about updating the conversation. Like I still do town halls where there'll be somebody saying like, just, talk to your kids, make sure your kids are doing this and this and this and this. And I'm like, okay, but we can't tell parents that do A, B, C, and D, and your kid will stay alive, because I can name you about 100 parents who did all of those things and still buried a child because of how deadly these drugs are now and how accessible they are to our kids. So yes, do all of those wonderful things, but also sit them down, teach them about fentanyl, teach them about fake pills, teach them that, drug dealers are going to hit them up on Snapchat and they don't look like scary people. It's not like you go in a dark alley and you meet someone scary. And, sometimes it's a businessman. Sometimes it's someone that's only 2 years older than you. And it's so different now. And these things have to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a different world out there. And the sad thing is, every high school, every college, every residence hall out of college should, have multiple Narcans on hand, because just like how they have defibrillators or fire extinguishers, whatever it may be, and I never, ever want to hear, a story of a teenager or a young adult in college overdosing on campus.
Well, it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah, it is. It is. And yeah, and I know a high school I hear just, I think it was 2 years ago, a kid thought he was taking a Xanax, and I don't believe it was mixed with fentanyl. There was a bunch of other stuff mixed in it, and he was rushed to the hospital immediately. And it's like, I mean, that's your, right there should be the eye opener and implement something.
And the other thing that whenever, a lot of times Narcan and test strips, will come up. So the other two things I always want to really make sure kids understand is that Narcan only helps if you're with someone that can Narcan. If you need Narcan, you will not be able to administer it to yourself because you will be completely anesthetized. So, kids need to understand, like, don't think, okay, I'm going to try this pill and I'm going to keep Narcan next to me in case I need it. No, if you get a dose, what it does is it puts you into a coma-like sleep. That's what happens. And then everything shuts down. Your body's instinct to wake up is completely suppressed. Your body's instinct to breathe suppressed. And that's what finally stops your heart. You won't know any of that is happening. You won't be able to Narcan yourself. And then the other thing with the test strips is they're designed for liquids. So if you're doing a pill, you have to pulverize that pill, mix it with water, very, very good. You may have to make it liquid in order to test it. And those strips don't test for every analog of fentanyl. And you can't test a portion of a pill. That won't tell you what's in the whole pill. You can't have 10 pills and test one and think that means the bag of pills is good. No. And don't believe anybody if they say to you, oh, I test all my pills, there's no fentanyl in it. If it's in pill form, it has not been tested. You can only use it on liquid.
Yeah. I mean, just some really basic harm reduction, tips like you just gave is really, we're not condoning drug use, but if you do use, no matter what age, don't use alone and have Narcan on hand. And then also remember the Good Samaritan law. I don't know if it's in all 50 states, but I believe it's very close, where if someone is overdosing, you can call and there's going to be no arrest made or anything like that. It's all about saving a life. That's it. It's so sad we've come to this point.
It really is. I mean, I hate that for this generation. I think about there's several points in development that are, curiosity and exploration, points in our development. Like one is like a toddler that's just learning how to walk. Well, what do? We baby proof the house, right? We try to minimize what
I'm doing that right now.
That can hurt, that can hurt them. And we teach them about the risks and don't touch the stove once they get tall enough and whatever. And it's like now, and then, and the next sort of big phase of exploration is, puberty and that, age and what these kids can get a hold of now is nothing. I mean, it's so different. Like we could never have gotten a hold of any of that stuff when we were going through that stage of our life, but we can't baby proof the world. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's everywhere.
Not
These
possible.
Synthetics are everywhere. They're not going anywhere. And so I almost don't even like to call them drugs because when you think of drugs, you think, plant-based, from the opium poppy, from the marijuana leaf, from cocaine, like it's plant-based. This is all lab made from chemicals. This, if you read Sam Quinones's book, he talks about this new meth that is, not based on ephedrine. And this new meth that's exploded everywhere is causing schizophrenia. It's causing just horrific mental, health issues.
Yeah. I know I'm here in Portland, Oregon, we had a massive meth issue, late 90s, when ephedrine, was everywhere with Sudafed and whatnot. And then when Sudafed was banned here in the States, I mean, the meth houses went from, it was a remarkable drop overnight. And I'm not saying meth went away, but then around 2013, 2014, all of a sudden you started seeing this here in Portland where, the individuals who you could see on the streets, it was just different. Completely different. And that's, the P2P meth that you were, talking about. And it's a totally different meth. Like you mentioned, the hallucinations, the mental,
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
The hoarding. I learned, this is all things I learned through the book, The Least of Us. Just a really good read. And like I say, the way he, writes his books, it's very readable. I listened to it actually. But because it's told through stories, through it's done and, with neuroscientists and recovering addicts and, just different people that in using their stories, explaining what's been going on with fentanyl and this P2P meth and why it's just never been more important for us to get this figured out as a country,
Yeah, seriously, it's not going to be handled. There's only so much nonprofits and local cities can do. It's going to be a whole national community effort to get this issue solved. It really is. It's so big now.
Step in it is talking about it without the stigma, and I just encourage, grieving families, everybody has to deal with their grief in their own way. And I don't fault anybody who's private or, doesn't want to speak out. But I would just say for those families who maybe are, haven't spoken out, but they're thinking about it, there is a whole community of us that will have your back. There's a community of us, parents who are speaking out, who are supporting each other, these are all great people. This whole idea that people that get involved with drugs or die from drugs are bad people or come from bad families is just absolute crap. It's
no,
not
it is
reality.
It is. And, I would say to this, just like you experienced, if you get 20 bad comments, 20 negative comments, because you lost a family member to whether it was addiction or a fake fentanyl pill and the child didn't know, there's going to be, if you get 20 negative comments, I mean, I'm being dead serious about this. There's going to be 10,000 families who are supporting you. They might not write it, but they are reading it and they are going through the exact same thing. I mean, they far outweigh, what's happening. And like we have a t-shirt for Henry's uncle where it says, stigma, shame silences, speak out, save lives. It's gotta end the stigma. It just has to happen.
Exactly. And I think the more that people see families that, that look like them and kids that look like their kids and they can see themselves. I mean, like we went to this one school that is in a suburb of Sacramento called Folsom, and it's a real high achieving school. Most of the kids go off to college. They're all, it's a very active school. I mean, the kids were in tears, several just wanting to hug us afterwards and just saying, I didn't know it could happen to kids like us, and I didn't know that, actually a lot of them knew that drugs were being sold on Snapchat when Chris asked that question. But then when he asked, well, how many of you know that most of the pills that are out there, like 97% of the pills that are being advertised to you guys are fake, only a couple hands went up. And that's why we're doing what we're doing.
That's wonderful. And then for more resources of what Laura's doing, please visit songforcharlie.org.
Yes, absolutely. There's great resources there. Charlie's parents, Ed and Mary Ternan, are real leaders in this and just really pushing hard with great content, for kids. And every resource on Song for Charlie is downloadable for free. Implement it in your school, implement it in a presentation. We are all very reachable. I have an email address. It's Laura, Laura, at songforcharlie.org. I'm happy to work with parents, and I work with grieving parents, a lot, and just trying to help. So many of the parents want to go into schools and don't know, it's not necessarily something they've done before. Like us, it's a totally new topic to them. So we have so many resources and slide decks and flyers, things like that are all free resources for schools and parents and teachers and counselors and doctors. I feel like this needs to be in every pediatrician's office, and anytime, one thing we hear a lot are, kids that get wisdom teeth pulled are often sent home, with an opioid prescription. Well, what I'd love to see is if they truly feel, that the young person needs that prescription, to have paperwork in there about the addictiveness of opioids, and also paperwork in there about these counterfeit pills, that says if your prescription runs out, do not, get a pill that's not from a pharmacy because they're not legit.
And many times with wisdom teeth, you can extra strength Tylenol.
Yeah. I mean, I really think, we need to get away from
not 2 weeks of Oxy.
Brains. No, young brains are so susceptible to addiction.
Yeah.
And then again, highly recommend Sam Quinones' book, The Least of Us.
Yes, I can concur with that as well. Laura, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on. I know it can't be easy, but what you're doing is incredible and saving, I know, countless lives. So I truly appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here and everything that you're doing as well in your brother's honor. And I truly believe that together we all can make a difference.
Yes, 100%. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Henry's Uncle podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. If you would like to learn more about our nonprofit, please go to henrysuncle.org. As we say here at Henry's Uncle, you are loved, never judged.